All right, everybody, we're back, and we have Scott Enyart on the phone.
Yes, how are you?
Good, great. Well, you were one of our early guests on the show, and I was delighted to speak to you because I know you don't give too many interviews, and you've been kind of low-key in the last 25 years, but you have a really interesting tale. And just to give people a background, you were a photographer in the Ambassador Hotel. Actually, you were only 15, 16 then?
Well, I was studying photojournalism, and I had been working in photography really since I was about 7 years old. I started working as an assistant when I was 14, and then started doing photojournalism and, worked on the high school paper, things like that, and really admired photojournalism. Grew up on Life magazine, the last sort of bastion of, terrific photojournalism that people could really, see outside their world. Back then, people didn't travel as much as they do now and everything, and unfortunately, what killed Life magazine was the Vietnam War. You'd turn the page and you'd see, dead children and women in a village, and then you turn to the next page and there'd be a color ad for Pampers. And that's basically what wiped that magazine out. And so it was becoming a lost art, and I got in on the tail end of it. And the Robert F. Kennedy assassination was, to me, my big assignment. That was what I was preparing for, and that was all the big-time photographers were going to be there. There were about almost 100 members of the press there, about 60 of them professional photographers, and guys I really admired, and plus I campaigned for Bobby Kennedy.
Right. And of course, I hope people know if they've heard our early shows, you were in the pantry clicking between 15 and 18 pictures while the shooting was going on. Your film was confiscated by the police. You went back the next day with your father, and they gave you a receipt for it. So they admitted they had your film, and they knew you took pictures of it.
Well, I was the only photographer who was in the pantry taking pictures at the time of the shooting. Everyone else had stopped taking pictures because they wanted to. He didn't come down and speak until after midnight. He didn't want to, make a mistake and declare early type of thing. And so what happened was that everybody was packing up their gear and going home, and me being young and not having the real knowledge and the priorities of, the fact they're only going to run a picture of him standing at the podium the next day, I was bound and determined to get every picture I could of him and, use all my film. So I followed him into the pantry. I was about 10 feet behind him and when the shooting took place. Paul Schrade was standing just in front of me. He was shot in the forehead. He fell backwards and knocked me down. I fell into the door frame. There was these two swinging doors into the pantry, one going in, one going out. I fell against the center beam, and later found out that there were two bullet holes about 4 inches over my shoulder. So if really Paul Schrade had not been hit and knocked me down, I probably would have been shot as well.
That's kind of unfortunate luck.
Well, it's chaos, and when you're 15 years old, the world is a very different place. You think you're invincible. It's like if you were in Vietnam and you're 18 and the guy next to you gets shot, you just go, hey, I'm lucky it wasn't me. If you're 40 years old and you got a wife and kids and a mortgage and a great job type of a thing, it has a very dramatic effect on you. And in fact, it caused psychological problems for me that I really have just dealt with recently. I'm almost 50 years old, and I was diagnosed with delayed stress syndrome. I used to wake up with nightmares and everything, and that night after what happened and the way I saw the rest of the press behaving and everything, I decided not to be a photojournalist and turned to studio photography, advertising, and movie posters, album covers, things like that, where I always had control over the situation in my studio. I would never go to a public event or go into a crowd with a camera and take pictures because I was afraid something would happen to somebody.
Yeah, and it sure happened. That was must have been quite a night. To bring people up to date, 20 years after the fact, you were told that your film was going to be handed back to you.
Well, also, not only was I the only photographer taking pictures, but I was taken into custody by the police. I was identified by other witnesses in the pantry as having taken pictures during the actual shooting. I was taken into custody by detectives, held in the hotel, taken to Rampart Station. I was questioned, held overnight. There's a tape recording of actual interview with detectives. I was the second person interviewed as a witness. I played that at trial, and actually on the tape, they take the film from me. So that was one of the reasons why we won our trial, which took us over 10 years to finally get to trial. And the police were found guilty on all 14 counts.
14 counts?
Yes.
And what were some of those?
Well, conversion of evidence, altering of evidence. They destroyed the door panels with the bullets in them because they said they wouldn't fit in the file cabinet. They destroyed the gun that they used to do the ballistics test.
Right, so this is destruction of evidence.
Destruction of evidence. They had Robert F. Kennedy's suit dry cleaned before the trial. They wouldn't let Thomas Noguchi, the coroner, testify at Sirhan's trial because they didn't like the results of his autopsy, which showed that Robert F. Kennedy was shot point blank from behind. The bullet that killed him was either at contact or less than 1 inch behind one ear, and he was shot in the neck and in the heart from behind. And Sirhan was in front of him the entire time, according to every witness in the pantry, and there were almost 70 people in the pantry. 14 to 20 witnesses actually in front, actually watching the shooting take place. All of them testified Sirhan got no closer than 3 feet to Kennedy and never raised his gun higher than waist level. There's no doubt that Sirhan walked in there and emptied his gun. I'm no apologist, and I'm also not a conspiracy buff. I'm a sort of reluctant scholar.
But everyone knows, as you mentioned, that Sirhan was in front of him.
Sirhan was absolutely in front of him, shot from the front, and Kennedy was killed shot entirely from behind. And the bullet removed from his brain was never able to be identified as having come from Sirhan's gun. None of the bullets did.
So, as a matter of fact, to be more specific, it was ruled they could not, I can't think of the right word, but...
They couldn't even determine the caliber.
Yeah.
Of the bullet. And also the gun that came into trial as Sirhan as the murder weapon, the serial number didn't match the gun that they used to perform the tests on the bullets. And also I have copies of the autopsy pictures of Robert F. Kennedy, and the police detectives brought in the murder weapon, set it on the autopsy table next to Kennedy. I actually have a photograph of it sitting there, and it's not an Ivor Johnson .22 caliber Cadet, which is the actual gun that Sirhan used. It's an entirely different weapon, different sight, different size, and everything. So we know that there were at least 2 guns there that were booked into evidence as murder weapons, in addition to Eugene Thane Caesar, who pulled his gun, who was the security guard who was standing to Kennedy's right, which is where all the bullets came from. And then a gentleman named Barry, who was a retired FBI who worked for the Kennedy family as security, he also had a gun. So there's 4 guns in the pantry, and Sirhan's gun held 8 bullets. And according to police and FBI reports, they recovered between 12 and 14 bullets from 5 other people were shot. Kennedy was shot 3 times. And then a number of other bullets were found. And so just based on that, we know that according to the police and the FBI's own reports, not according to, conspiracy buffs, that more than 1 gun was fired in that pantry. And there's no doubt that Sirhan came in there with the intent to kill Robert F. Kennedy. I don't doubt that whatsoever. Whether or not his gun was the one that was fired that actually killed him, that's where the doubt is.
Yeah, and he seems to have been in a hypnotic trance because he doesn't remember anything to this day.
Well, I have photographs, once again, that have never been seen from police files that show Sirhan standing 5 feet from the podium watching Kennedy's speech. He has his hand on the shoulder of a woman wearing the polka dot dress.
Well, there's been a lot of speculation about her being a handler. And these are new photos?
Yes, these have never been seen. These have been hidden by the police. And I have copies of them. And Sirhan has a smile on his face. He looks totally coherent. He doesn't look drunk. He doesn't look hypnotized or anything like that. He's got his hand on her shoulder. They're both of Middle Eastern appearance, and they're obviously with each other with smiles on their faces watching Kennedy's speech.
Evidently she was seen running out the back, right?
Yes, by Sandy Serrano, who's interviewed by a CIA polygraph expert. I have a tape of that, and
that is one shocking tape. I've heard that.
Yeah, if you've heard that, it's absolutely shocking. You know, Kennedy's looking down at you from heaven. Why are you lying? You know, this is a cancer growing in you. I mean, just absolutely abusive tactics. And also, Sandy Serrano was accused of stealing money during a fundraising for, I think it was Gloria Molina's campaign, and which was, as far as everyone can, all the evidence points to, was a setup. There was never any money found or any money missing. And in exchange for her not being prosecuted, she's not been allowed to talk about what happened for basically the last 20 years.
Now, she's never publicly spoke about it, but her interview hasn't made it around. I think I saw that on a...
Well, there were older interviews. This was a long time ago. This was back, she was interviewed immediately afterward, in which that was when she made the statements. But you haven't heard anything from her in the last 10 years or so.
No, and you're saying that she's prohibited from speaking?
That was right. That was the agreement between her and the police, is they would not prosecute her if she would agree not to go into the woman with the polka dot dress. I also went to the California State Archives and went through every single photograph and negative, except for the autopsy photos, which I got through another source. And there are probably 10 women in polka dot dresses.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
Which wouldn't be uncommon in the crowd of 2,000 people.
Right, but no, of course not. You're not referring to, though, that would be seen running out the back saying, "We got him," you know.
Right, and also, we got him, or they got him, or she got him, people in panic, everybody, when this took place, there were thousands of people at the Ambassador Hotel. There were over 10,000 people. There was an event at the Coconut Grove, and there were two other political, I think Rafferty and someone else, were also having campaign events at the hotel. And when this took place, people felt that there were terrorists in the hotel and that there were more than one person with a gun. And so all the witnesses and everything, far before the police arrived, who took over 20 minutes to get there, ran from the hotel. So basically, you lost probably 90% of the evidence that you would have had. If you hear the audio tape of the call from the Ambassador Hotel to Rampart Station, we all know about Rampart Station now, they ask where the Ambassador Hotel is, which is only 13 acres on Wilshire Boulevard, 5 blocks away from Rampart Station. They didn't know who Senator Kennedy was, and they basically just were absolutely rude and obnoxious with the woman on the phone and said, are you sure? We'll go check. Is he really hurt? Type of a thing. And it took well over 20 minutes for first LAPD officers to arrive.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, I was taken into custody at gunpoint, and my camera was taken, my film was taken, and then held for 20 years, supposedly under court order from a judge, which during our trial, we put them on the stand, and there was no court order. The police department just decided they did not want to release evidence.
So, and basically they lied to you?
Basically they lied to everybody. To say a judge put a 20-year gag order when the police just decided, gee, we don't want anything, and then everything went to the California State Archives, and one of my attorneys called up the head of evidence at Parker Center, and she says, I'm a student from, USC, and I'm studying police science, and I was wondering if I could ask you about, evidence. And so she warmed up to the guy and asked him a bunch of questions and everything about how things were done. And at the end of the conversation, she said, gee, if you had like an old case like the Robert F. Kennedy case, she says, you wouldn't still have any evidence from that. And the guy said, I got boxes and boxes of stuff sitting here from the Kennedy investigation. And the other thing is that they burned They burned 2,400 photographs in a hospital incinerator in the middle of the night 3 weeks before Sirhan's trial.
Right, and that was a stack, I believe, like 2 feet high?
Yeah, it was...
We're not talking about a few photographs. You're saying...
2,400, over 2,400 photographs were burned, and they were not logged as evidence, and they were not in the evidence books.
Now, I don't want to get too off topic, but for the listeners not familiar with California, maybe you should just give a little history into the Rampart Station and things that happened in the last
Right.
year.
What happened was our trial took it took us 10 years to get to trial. Our trial took 7 weeks. The city of Los Angeles hired this guy Skip Miller, who's the guy who got the Rodney King cops off. They admitted to spending over $2 million to try to defeat my case. They were found guilty on all 14 counts, and then they went, of course, to the appeals court, and they appealed, and they went before the appeals court, and they said that the reason why the appeal should be overturned is, first of all, the attorney, Skip Miller, who was hired by the city, spoke to the jury foreman before he was dismissed from the jury during jury deliberations, which is entirely illegal. He was then found guilty by the bar. He was reported by the judge and convicted by the bar for what in effect is jury tampering. He got a 1-day suspension because basically he defends police. And they said what it was based on was that one of the jurors said that police routinely screw over minorities and people who are arrested for crimes. Well, these judges who were appalled by this, and they said, "Oh, you can't have people saying things like that in the jury room." And then 2 months later, Rampart Station broke open, and this one officer in charge of the crash unit, Perez, which went after gangs, he cut a deal and was found guilty, as were a number of other officers, of planting guns on suspects, killing suspects, planting drugs on suspects, stealing cocaine from the evidence locker and selling it for money. And so Rampart Station was extremely dirty. So when we came up for our second trial...
And that was the tip of the iceberg. There was story after story.
Story after story, exactly.
Yeah, like killing people, planting evidence, just unbelievable.
People sent to jail for years, people paralyzed, people shot, and people killed from Ramparts. So Ramparts was a pretty dirty station. And so what happened is when we came up for our second trial, we went before the judge, and I instructed my attorneys. I said, I was taken to Rampart Station, and all the evidence from the Kennedy assassination was booked at Rampart Station. What I did was I told my attorneys, I said, in every other statement of our opening brief, I said, I want Rampart Station mentioned, and I want all of the records going back 30 years of evidence handling at Rampart Station. And, of course, the city freaked out, and the last thing they wanted to do was have Rampart Station being tried, as well as the Robert F. Kennedy assassination being tried again, which we had done. One of the main reasons why I did this case was I knew my film was gone. I had been to the California State Archives and had inspected everything and knew that it was missing and probably had been destroyed. And what I wanted to do was, and one of the reasons why I went through this case and spent so much money and time, I spent over $500,000 on this case, was I wanted to retry the Robert F. Kennedy assassination for the first time, because Sirhan basically, his attorney sold him out and just said, hey, he's guilty, lock him up. And so what happened is Thomas Noguchi, the coroner who did the autopsy on Robert F. Kennedy, was not allowed to testify at Sirhan's trial because the police did not like the results of his findings, which were that he was shot from behind.
Right, and
recreation. So for the first time, we had Thomas Noguchi on the stand under oath testify about his autopsy in the Robert F. Kennedy assassination. We had every police officer who's still alive who was at that hotel, as well as FBI agencies, under oath describing exactly what happened the evening of Robert F. Kennedy's assassination. So on the record now, we've got 7 weeks of trial of the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, proving that there were more than 8 bullets, proving that basically, and I'm the last person who wants to get Sirhan out of jail, but like I said, there's no doubt he went in there with the intent to shoot and kill, but he may have fired his gun and injured, 5 people, but he may not have been the person who actually killed Robert F. Kennedy, in which case he would have been out of jail in probably 7 years.
Yeah, it's most likely that he was there to cause a commotion in somebody else. I can't tell you what was in his mind, so I'll leave that alone. But as you mentioned, or if you did this time or last time, Noguchi's report said he was shot between 0 and 4 inches because of powder burns.
It was 1 inch or less. He was shot behind the right ear.
Oh, 1 inch or less.
Ear. And what happened was that is exactly where Eugene Thane Caesar, the security guard who was a Wallace supporter, was standing.
Worked for Lockheed.
And when Kennedy fell, he actually had this guy's clip-on tie gripped in his hand. They both fell, and I personally think that Thane Caesar pulled his weapon to return fire. And when Kennedy fell, he knocked him down, and probably when his elbow hit the ground, that's when the shot to Kennedy's head came from Eugene Thane Caesar's gun, which would make Kennedy's assassination basically a horrific accident.
Yeah. Or another theory is put forward: if the gun behind him was lower, as he pulled the first shot, it hit him in the back, and as he fell, the trigger kept pulling. Kennedy would have fallen kind of in line with his hand, and 1, 2, 3.
Right, but there's no way you can politically connect Eugene Thane Caesar and Sirhan Sirhan.
No, not at all.
Politically, and the idea that if you and I were decided, okay, we're going to kill this guy, first of all, we're not going to do it in a room with 70 people, 70 witnesses, and I'm not going to stand in front of him, and you're not going to stand behind him, and then we're going to shoot at each other to kill the guy. So I think that although maybe, and the chances of two people assassinating someone at the precise second, literally within seconds, if you listen to the audio tape of the bullets being fired, in which there are, like I said, between 12 and 14 bullets identified.
Between 12 and 14 on audio tape? On
audio tape.
And you have that tape?
No, I don't have that audio tape. I think KFI has that audio tape, and that's been buried. That's another thing that they won't allow to go out. There was also a radio reporter who had his tape recorder on at the time who stated that there were two guns and that Kennedy was shot by two people. He reported it on the air live, and then that interview has disappeared, and that guy has since passed away.
Did you try to subpoena the radio station during your trial?
They said the evidence doesn't exist at the California State Archives. The police would have confiscated it, and the police destroyed, for example, over 1,000 audio interviews. I think only 300 remained of all the audio interviews that were there, and one of them happened to be mine.
Did they discuss any reasoning for all this mass destruction of evidence?
Well, for example, the door frame they claim wouldn't fit in a file cabinet. The California State Archives certainly had plenty of room for it, and like I said, I'm giving a personal opinion here, but I know that a call came from the FBI and the CIA when Robert F. Kennedy was shot, and they called the LAPD and they said, we don't want another Dallas. And so the LAPD immediately went to work, and they said, well, hey, look, the guy walked in with the gun, he emptied the gun and shot him, we got the guy. They took all the evidence that pointed to Sirhan, and they got it ready for trial, and anything that went in any other direction, my film or which would have shown what took place from behind Robert Kennedy from 10 feet, they took all the evidence that pointed in any other direction, and they destroyed it and took him to trial.
Right. Okay, so I guess it was a year and a half ago that your trial did take place.
Actually, it was 1988.
Oh, no, was it 1988? Well, why didn't we hear from this until around 1998?
Was it? I'm sorry. It was I'm sorry. It was 1998. We finally got to trial.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
We had been to trial so many times. We had been to the appeals court. We've been thrown out. We had been reinstated. We sued the FBI. We were thrown out of federal court. We appealed. We had been reinstated. Like I said, it was 10, 11 years of my life has been wrapped up in this trial. And so, yes, and in 1998, we finally got to trial. It was right after the O.J. Simpson trial, and so they banned the electronic media from the courtroom. Court TV wanted to cover it. All the television stations wanted to cover it. They allowed one still photographer in on the first day, and then they allowed reporters in with notebooks and no photography. So they wanted to guarantee that there would be no coverage. We also called Bernard Parks, who's now the police chief of Los Angeles, in as a witness because he was an assistant to Ed Davis. He came in with about 20 people from the LAPD and a bunch of attorneys, and they spoke with the judge, and he did not testify because it would have dirtied him, basically, and they already had plans for him to be police chief. So the politics that went on behind the scenes were just absolutely horrendous. And the behavior of Skip Miller and the defense was just absolutely offensive. Contacting the jury foreman, during deliberations, lying to the judge, blatantly, I was forced to undergo psychiatric evaluation before trial, and then had to hire my own psychiatrist. They ground the money type of a thing to try to win the trial. Was absolutely.
You sure lose your faith in the system because I've gone through, and as you articulated in your first interview with us, all the different underhanded things they tried to do to dissuade you.
Well, it's not so much losing faith in the system, it's understanding the system. It's like television news. You don't believe everything that you see, but it's a tool and it can be used, and I used it effectively. People say to me, gee, Scott, would you spend $500,000 in 10 years of your life pursuing this just to go up there and, get all these people to testify? Paul Schrade, people who were injured and all these other experts and everything. And I would do it again because to me, it's a political issue. And, I was 15 years old at the time. More than half the people who were there are dead now. At some point, the other thing is that the technology has advanced so much in terms of ballistics and things like this that to not go and re-examine the autopsy reports and the ballistics and everything to find out really what happened is an absolute crime against the citizens of the United States.
Well, what you did do is a great public service, as you mentioned. You got on the record people like Thomas Noguchi and some of these other policemen who were there to back up and confirm your claims of what was going on there. And of course,
they also we had the first officer on the scene who wrote the report. We showed him the report, and he said, "That's not my report. That's not my signature." He said, "I turned it in. Somebody else rewrote it to the way that they liked it, and then they signed it." We had police officers who...
that's a shocking admission right there.
Oh, yeah. We had police officers who, perjured themselves, on the stand, who were, and were convicted of perjury. 3 officers were found guilty. We had police officers who...
that's a shocking admission right there.
Oh, yeah. We had police officers who, perjured themselves, on the stand, who were, and were convicted of perjury. 3 officers were found guilty. We had...
Perjury and your trial.
Yes. We had one police officer who was essential to our case, and we wanted him subpoenaed for trial, and they said, well, we don't know where he is. We can't find him, and so, he can't testify. Well, he sure cashes his pension check. They know his address. They know exactly where he is. So they hid witnesses. They also claimed that they found my film 2 weeks before trial. And I'm a digital effects designer for the motion picture and television industry, and so film is my business. And so I knew that these were forged films, and what they had done is they had taken photographs taken by other photographers, and they actually were stupid enough to copy it on Kodak copy film, ASA 125, actually it was Ilford copy film, and then make a proof sheet and claim that these were my pictures, that they found them at the archives, and they just happened to have the police officer who booked the film into custody back in 1968 with them at the California State Archives to sign the report.
And authenticate them.
Well, what the mistake that they made is that there were evidence books. There were 3 evidence logs, and then 2 of the evidence logs, there were numbers 25 and 26, and we had, those were, I think, bullet fragments and something else. And we actually photographed those pages, and what they did was they opened up those 2 numbers. They removed that evidence, and they put my evidence in there. And we showed that in court, and then I demanded that the film be brought down from Sacramento because I said, I'm going to put it on a scanner and I'm going to prove, because there'll be double grain, I said I can tell whether something is three-dimensional or it's a photograph of a flat object. And when the defense heard that, when Skip Miller heard that, well, when the film came down from Sacramento, the courier was robbed in Culver City, and the film was stolen.
Now, this is the most shocking turn of events in the whole trial, as far as I'm concerned. And if people aren't familiar with that, what Scott's telling us is that they were going to produce the film. They were going to say, okay, we're bringing it over to you.
This film,
so,
that's right.
They got a courier to bring it over, and on the way to the courthouse, he's mysteriously robbed. I think some guys ran up and...
While he was sitting in the car, it was stolen off the back seat after his rear tire had been
slashed,
punctured with with what they determined was an ice pick.
Yeah, so some guys ran up to him at a red light, slashed
his
tire.
Car, flattened his tire. He pulled into a gas station, called on his cell phone, and someone reached in through the passenger door, unlocked the back door, and stole the briefcase with the film in it.
Now, that's not as shocking as what's going to happen next. So when you, in your trial, you had the owner of the courier company, you had him testify. What did he say?
Well, that was what was amazing. He said, I've been in the courier business for 25 years, and he says, the only thing anybody asks me is how much is it going to cost and when's it going to get there? He said, Skip Miller's office called. He spoke directly with Skip Miller, and he wanted to know the flight. He wanted to know what the guy was going to be wearing. He wanted to know the color of the rental car, and he wanted to know the route he was going to be taking to the courthouse.
The color of the car, the route, the flight.
And what he was going to be wearing.
And this is Skip Miller.
Yeah, and what time what time his flight was going to be arriving. And of course, it was stolen in Culver City, which is out of LAPD control. So you couldn't say that the LAPD stole it. You could say, it was it was another police department that was their jurisdiction.
It's all. I've got to say, it's the most shocking thing I've heard in this whole case. Is that Skip Miller, and he testified that his call came from his office.
Right.
And now, what happened to Skip Miller over that?
Well, nothing happened over the film being stolen, but what happened over his contacting the jury foreman was the judge reported him to the bar. He was prosecuted by the bar. He was found guilty of what in effect is illegal contact with a juror, which is attempted jury tampering. And he was, they suggested a suspension of his license for 1 to 2 years, and his license was suspended for 1 day, and he had to take an ethics class. Now,
so,
I mean,
1 day.
Yeah, you can ask an elementary school student if it's okay for an attorney to talk to a member of the jury during deliberations, and they know that it's wrong. What he did was he blamed it on a subordinate in his office that the guy looked up an old law. Well, in Skip Miller's office, if someone did that and got Skip Miller practically disbarred and charged, this guy would have been fired or, found dead in the parking lot. Instead, he was promoted to senior partner and given a raise.
Yeah, so the fix was in.
Yeah. The fix was in all the way around. He threw himself on a hand grenade. What happened is that the jury came out and spoke before the judge, and they said, Judge, we're having a problem. We've gotten from 1 to 7, and we've reached guilty verdicts on 1 to 7, but we can't get past 7. Well, 7 were the crimes. The rest of it was how much they were going to pay me and what the punishment was going to be. So Skip Miller realized he lost the case. So by contacting the jury foreman, he was trying to get a mistrial, basically throwing himself on a hand grenade. You're talking about a guy who defended Nate Holden. He's Mayor Reardon's personal attorney, which is certainly a conflict of interest. Got cut the deal for Michael Jackson for child molestation. Got Kim Bassinger for $9 million. He never lost a case in 24 years until this case.
That was that he was going to be. He already knew that.
He knew he lost.
Yeah. That's disgusting to actually hear that happens.
Well, the advantage that we had is that Skip Miller, was his ego got in the way, and he knew nothing about the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, and he knew nothing about photography. And so based on those two issues, we just completely destroyed him. He even flew in Bill Epridge and Harry Benson from New York and England to testify, photographers who were there, to try to prove that I wasn't in the pantry when Kennedy was shot. Well, they both had to admit on the stand that they weren't in the pantry when Kennedy was shot. So, they ended up looking like fools on the stand. A number of people self-destructed on the stand. A number of police officers, admitted to things and mishandling of evidence, and we had evidence of two guns being booked into evidence that night. The gun left the Ambassador Hotel in Rayford Johnson's pocket. It was handed over to the police at the hospital. So you're talking about mishandling of evidence, and also the Ambassador Hotel staff went to work immediately cleaning the pantry. They cleaned the blood off the floor, they scrubbed the tables and put everything back and put everything in order. I came back the following morning and I walked through the pantry. So the crime scene was not sealed. Thomas Noguchi made a film recreation of what happened. Police didn't like it and so wouldn't allow it to be shown in court, and they went and they filmed their own and did basically, your magic bullet situation, where a bullet goes through Kennedy's shoulder pad of his coat, goes through the ceiling panel, bounces off the ceiling, goes down, hits the floor, and then bounces up and hits a woman in the forehead who was down, tying her shoe. This is the type of absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, well, that'll happen. But I'm talking about what disgusts me is that Skip Miller would call the courier company and set up this robbery and then get 1 day.
Well, he wasn't charged with that. That was the thing.
No,
that was just that was just an accident. And he said, that's just an unlucky coincidence, Gee, isn't that a shame, And the judge, absolutely everybody was absolutely shocked. I wasn't surprised at all because I had a proof sheet of it that showed that it was Ilford copy film ASA 125, which is too slow. I use a Tri-X, which is ASA 400, to shoot under the low light, situations. I actually was given back prints at Parker Center about 2 months after the assassination by the police detectives, and I have the photographs that I took his speech, and I have photographs of everything that took place after I left the pantry. They kept all the pictures from the pantry and said they had to use them in the trial. They complimented me. They told me I helped put Sirhan behind bars. They never re-interviewed me. The FBI never re-interviewed me. It was just anyone that they interviewed that they didn't like their testimony. Basically 14 people who were standing there really watching right in front during the shooting, those audio tapes were destroyed.
Right.
And like I said, I went to the California State Archives 3 times, examined every negative and every photograph in the archives, and my photographs don't exist. And all of a sudden, Skip Miller goes up there 2 weeks before with the police officer that signed in my film as evidence, and all of a sudden finds it. The other thing is that the photographs on the proof sheet were out of sequence.
Yeah, right. And you have at least one example of your photos not in the pantry.
Oh yeah, I have everything. I have people wounded afterward. I have Kennedy on the stretcher. I have the entire speech. I was there from 6 o'clock in the evening till 3 o'clock in the morning when I was transported on a jail bus to Rampart Station. I was the second person interviewed after George Plimpton. Yeah.
Okay. Now that trial came to a conclusion, I understand they appealed.
Right. The appeal, well, the appeals judges said, well, we can't have people going around saying that the LAPD routinely sets people up and plants evidence.
Although that was the truth.
Although that was the truth. Rampart Station information came out 2 months later, and so they said you're set for retrial. And so when it came up time for retrial, the city realized that they were going to have to defend Rampart Station and all these police officers, and they were going to have to release all of the documents from Rampart Station to my attorneys. And they realized that they were dead, and also they couldn't keep the media out. this time. The law had changed. And so the city settled with me and paid me off. And although it's in the six figures, I can't discuss the exact amount. I came nowhere near recovering the amount of money that I spent on this trial. But like I said, I don't regret it. My father told me, fought in World War II. He was a Marine first on the beach, Guadalcanal. He said, pick your battles. He says, you can go out and you can fight hunger and save the whales, this, that, and the other thing. He says, if you're going to fight something in your life, he says, pick one thing. He says, go for it. And he says, do a good job. And he says, and that's it. He says, you can't spend your life, running around, chasing everything.
Right.
And I accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish in it, as well as there's no gag order. I've written a book, doing a documentary, and Skip Miller was found guilty by the bar, as well as Skip Miller's own partners were suing him for sexual harassment, for double billing. You're talking about a real, when you talk about the definition of a lying, sleazy attorney, you're talking about Skip Miller. Skip Miller lied in court practically every day, and I'm not just saying that. I'm talking about the judge catching him in a lie, calling him into chambers, and then sanctioning him.
Sanctioning him as a liar. He should have been charged with a lot more perjury, it sounds like.
Well, but what's interesting is that, and what sort of surprised me about this whole thing was that in a courtroom, everyone has to tell the truth except for lawyers. The lawyers are allowed to lie. They can make up anything. It's when did you stop beating your wife? Isn't it true, Mr. Enyart, that you drove over 6 school children on the way here to court? They can say that. They're the only ones who can consistently lie and get away with it. That's part of their job. And they're not under oath.
Okay, so the city, rather than go through the embarrassment, they made an out-of-court settlement with you.
That's
but
correct.
now you get to keep all these records. So you have transcripts?
I have audio tapes of the entire trial, the entire 7 weeks. What's interesting is that the entire clerk's record disappeared from the courthouse toward the end of the trial.
You brought that up before.
It cost me
unbelievable.
It cost me $10,000 to reconstruct that record. The clerk's record is everything that takes place with the jury outside of the courtroom. I spoke personally with the guy who's in charge of that department, and he said, occasionally, you'll lose a notebook, you'll lose a tape. He says, never, he says, does the entire transcript from a trial, from a 7-week trial, disappear. He says, you can't walk out of here with 6 carts of documents without somebody noticing. And it happened to take place during a strike of court reporters.
Yeah, that's again.
Everything is engineered. Everything is still fighting City Hall. And one of the most important things about this case that I wanted to prove was that the cover-up continues. It's not that they just covered it up back then. They are continuing to destroy evidence. They're continuing to lie, and they're continuing to cover up the truth in the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, which is just an absolute crime.
So you mentioned then that you're not stopping with this. You're making a documentary?
That's right, yeah. I'm in the middle of making a documentary. Ted Chirac was a tremendous help to me. He has a tremendous archive of photographs and tapes and things like this, secret police documents and everything. And the thing is the great thing about the documentary is it's not just, some nut going, the mafia tried to kill Kennedy. It's all police documents and FBI documents and news photographs and news tape and interviews with witnesses. So I don't take a point of view in the documentary and say, that the CIA had him killed or Fidel Castro. basically all I do is present the evidence that the police presented that you weren't allowed to see. And when you see that, it's absolutely frightening what's happening and what's been allowed in our court system.
Well, you're going to have to let us know when that's ready or out on the air, because I'm sure a lot of people here would like to see that and support your effort.
I certainly will.
By watching that.
I certainly will.
Well, it's kind of, I'm so glad that you went through the effort. I think as a public service to get Noguchi and other people to their testimony on record is very admirable. I hope that at least with these ongoing efforts you have, in fact, you mentioned you have a few documentaries up in the air. Did you not say for Europe and whatnot?
What's happened was that I was at Universal Studios doing visual effects, and then took time off for the trial, moved to another company, then formed my own visual effects company, and with the money from that and the settlement from the city, I formed my own documentary film company.
Great.
And,
well, what I was getting at, I was hoping that at least you would be breaking even, like you spent an awful lot of time and effort, and also personal money, personal funds. So that's what we're just hoping that.
I make a good living, and so I didn't break even. I don't expect to break even, and the strange thing about it is that the series of documentaries that I'm doing, the basis of them is ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. You know, anyone can do the Civil War or a documentary about Napoleon. These are people who are drawn into a situation involuntarily, who end up uncovering something or becoming obsessed with something, and it's basically it's a story of 35 years of obsession, including the toll that it took on my family, my finances, my marriage, my career. And my mental health. I suffered a great many. I was depressed for 20 years, suffered delayed stress syndrome.
This search
became
for
obsessive compulsive, became agoraphobic, all of these things, and became quite physically ill as a result of this whole thing. So a large price was paid for this, and but like I said, once again, now that it's over, I can look back at it in hindsight, and it was well worth it.
Yeah, but I was going to say, kind of in a perfect world, this search for the truth shouldn't have to be like that. There should be police and a judicial system that would back up a person and not fight them at every turn.
Well, and that was the thing is that, I think that 90% of the policemen and investigators that worked on the Robert F. Kennedy case are upstanding heroes of this community. I am a supporter, and I am very in favor of a lot of the work the police department has done. It was the people at the top. It was guys like Ed Davis. It was people from Washington. It was guys from the FBI. It was, a number of people who, political people, who, Sam Yorty, mayor at the time. Who these are the people that directed this, and both Daryl Gates and Bernard Parks were the assistants to Ed Davis at the time, and so I look at all of these people as white collar criminals.
Yeah, and of course, the historic revelations about the Ramparts station and all the goings-on there.
That's right.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I realize you don't give out too many interviews, so we're just thrilled to get you on and recap all this and let people know what the outcome was.
Yeah, it's a pleasure speaking with you. You're the only one that I've spoken with. I stopped giving interviews right after the trial. You're the only one I've spoken to, and we'll continue to keep informed on this. And then, of course, when the documentary and the book come out, we'll be talking again. But every year on the assassination, the anniversary of the assassination, I get 20 to 50 phone calls to do interviews for television, things like that, and it's become a circus. You've got the the Holy Trinity. You've got Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, and the Kennedys. And anything that has to do with these people are going to watch, and they do it for ratings. And unless there's new information or something that's really going to change things, and I have new evidence, new police evidence that comes from the police department. It's like, who needs another documentary about, the assassination of a Kennedy? Well, I've got stuff that's never been seen before, and I have evidence that is under oath during trial, and I have photographs that were taken by the police that the police don't even know that I have. So you're going to see some brand new stuff that's going to be absolutely shocking.
Great. Okay, then, is there anything that you'd like to bring up then that we didn't get to? Just summarizing, or?
No, other than, just to not forget that this is still going on in our country. We're talking about Martin Luther King was killed 2 months before Robert F. Kennedy, and we're talking about a cover-up that's continuing to take place, and that the political powers and the police powers need to be reined in, and regular citizens and the public is entitled to know things. To seal evidence for 20 years under a lie.
Well, I think that
no one's been punished for this. For Skip Miller to get a one-day suspension for
it's obscene.
Contacting a juror is absolutely obscene. The guy should be disbarred.
I hope that thanks to your documentary, you will get to the average citizen who may doubt this, let them open their eyes and say, this is the kind of stuff that's been going on for 20, 30 years.
Well, that's also why I've waited this long, is that back in, 1970, people still believed in the government. They didn't believe, that John F. Kennedy was, that there was any conspiracy there. They just, everybody, life was too good type of a thing. My generation has grown up. We're open to these things. We don't necessarily believe them, but we certainly have an open mind and we want the information. And so now is the time. And like I said, and now overall this entire period of time, during our trial, there was an ad in the Los Angeles Times classified section, for sale by a former police officer, evidence from the Robert F. Kennedy trial, assassination.
What do you make of that?
Well, that's what I'm saying is they're saying, oh no, all the evidence is up at the state archives, and here, that they've got boxes of it down here, and police officers are actually out selling it. So it's there's a lot of control that's been lost in these types of circumstances, and to not re-examine the evidence of the Robert F. Kennedy assassination with the current forensic and ballistic evidence is absolutely a crime.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to your documentary.
Good. I'll keep informed with you, and you'll be one of the first to know.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you so much for the interview.
You bet.
Okay, good night.
Thanks.